especially with this generation, my professors would send me these 40 question surveys to my email asking me to do things. I'm like, okay, well, first of all, what's the prize? And how quickly can I get through this to get to the end? And can I watch TikTok at the same time? And so, it's just clearly there's this disconnect happening.
Hey everybody, this is Jeremy Tiers from Tutor Collegiate Strategies, and you're about to check out the latest episode of the Mission of Mission podcast, a show that's designed to help higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and managers. Each week I'll introduce you to an industry leader or difference maker who will share helpful advice, tips, and strategies that will help you grow professionally and personally. Mission of Mission is part of the Enrollify podcast network. I'm excited to share my latest candid conversation, so let's get started. This is episode 17 of the Mission Admissions podcast. I'm extremely excited to have this guest here with me today. I've been following the work of Andrew Roth and his dcdx company and feel like he's got a very good understanding of what makes Gen Z tick. So Andrew, before we dive in, can you give everybody listening kind of the Cliff Notes origin story of your journey to becoming a 24-year-old founder and CEO of a Gen Z consulting firm?
Of course. And thank you again, Jeremy, for having me today. And yeah, dcdx is a Gen Z consulting firm, and the origins of it came right around COVID. So I was studying abroad. I was in London and got sent home. And kind of at that time, two things became very obvious to me. One was that the voices of Gen Z were asking, and in some cases demanding things from leaders, from institutions, and many times they weren't being heard and listened to. And that was only exacerbated by the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, and it became very clear there's this disconnect between what young people wanted and what they were asking for, and what organizations, what brands, what institutions were doing and saying. And so, that was kind of the flip of the switch that said, hey, something needs to change here, something needs to happen. But for me, and as a Gen Zer, I think the one thing that always frustrated me a little bit about research and kind of understanding a cohort is that, especially with this generation, my professors would send me these 40 question surveys to my email asking me to do things. I'm like, okay, well, first of all, what's the prize? And how quickly can I get through this to get to the end? And can I watch TikTok at the same time? And so, it's just clearly there's this disconnect happening between not only listening to and understanding the voices of this generation, but actually measuring and trying to learn more about them, just the methods themselves. And so between those two things, it was an opportunity for us to come in as Gen Zers, to bring our voices to the table, but also do it in a Gen Z way. And that's really what got us started.
What's the biggest thing Gen Z complains about?
The biggest thing Gen Z complains about, oh my gosh, I think there's it's somewhat of a misconception. I think in the workplace, all the time I see these articles out in the workplace, like Gen Z, they're quiet quitting, like they don't want to work hard at their jobs. I think this is just this general idea of that, and that's I understand. I think a lot of times there's a comparison that happens. Back in my day when I was entering the workforce, we just didn't say anything. We worked and did this, and that's natural. I get it, but I think with this generation, it's about understanding the context and why these behaviors are happening, right? It's not that we're lazy or complainers. It's just that we're fundamentally living a different life. We've grown up in a different era, right? The fact that we've been born with technology and Google at our fingertips, we don't remember a time before being able to do that. And so, yeah, when we don't get something like that, it might affect how we respond, because it's just who we are. It's part of our nature.
Yeah, I have a 13-year-old daughter, as a lot of the audience knows, and again, we joke with her all the time. I'm old enough, as I was sharing with you, at 47 to remember when email literally became a thing, right? I was literally a sophomore in college, and I just remember my university saying, all right, now you got to wait to go use the computer lab and this thing called email, which is the way we're going to communicate with you. And that's how far we've come, right? Because that's the mid to late 90s right there. And to your point, I think it's understanding it has changed. So then why do you feel like, because I understand that brands, people who work for colleges and universities who are listening to this, Andrew, they know it's changed. I don't think anybody's looking going, what was changed? What? They're a different generation with all this technology. Why is it so hard? What is the disconnect that you feel like, right, gets so many brands and colleges and companies to struggle with? well, then we're just going to change the way we do things to make it more, again,
Yeah.
customer-centered, student-focused.
Yeah, great question. To me, I think the biggest challenge here is that with this generation, and not even Gen Z specifically, but more the time we are, like our era in culture right now, things are changing at a faster and faster rate, right? Especially with this generation, with trends and with technology. It's not only that there's new things being introduced, right? It's not that okay, now there's TikTok and now there's all these new platforms. It's the fact that they're changing so quickly, which I think poses the biggest challenge for a lot of marketers and institutions to say, why even try and understand if tomorrow or the next day it's going to be different, right? And that's like the name of our company is dcdx, which is a reference to derivative, if you remember your calculus days back in school, of dy/dx, right? But where C stands for culture, and it's this idea that in order to understand this generation, in order to truly understand what's happening, we have to actually measure and look at the way in which culture is changing and how fast culture is changing, because that's what's really dictating like the way in which this generation is responding and behaving. And I think we see it all the time. That's just like, how do we even keep up is like the biggest question. How do we keep up with just the rate at which things are happening today in all areas?
So I feel like the platforms, I get that, the way we communicate is changing, right? But I feel like there are, and I would love your take on this, foundational things that people in my generation, people in Gen Z and your generation have always wanted, and the generation coming next behind Gen Z 100% wants the same thing too, which is these lovely buzzwords we've heard about now for years, which are authenticity, just like sounding like a human, not like a robot, showing empathy. Those to me are foundational things, Andrew. Yeah. Why do you think then it's so hard to kind of get those kind of mixed in as we communicate with all of these different brands and companies to Gen Z?
Yeah, I mean, I think one part of that is the pure amount of information that this generation and the next will be receiving, right? It's not just that we want authenticity. It's because of the fact that we see young kids are seeing so many different ads throughout the day. They're getting so many different, because they're on their phones, just their phones alone for 7 hours a day, and on TikTok for 2, whatever it is. Like they're seeing so many pieces of information, and so the point at which, like the distillation point for them, and a point they have to make a decision. Hey, is this relevant to me? Do I want to engage with this? Is so much smaller, and there's so much more of a kind of a BS filter. Like a lot of people say, is there's like a Gen Z has a BS filter because they have to, right? Because there's so much more information that they just have to have this way to sort through it quickly.
So then what advice, if you're talking to a company that wants to communicate with Gen Z, a college or university's head of marketing, director of enrollment admissions, what advice are you giving him or her in terms of, all right, you've got all this outside noise, a lot of which you can't control. If you want to get more people to talk to you, if you want to get more people to open emails, read text and respond, and like talk to you on the phone, you need to do A, B, and C. What are A, B, and C in your opinion?
Yeah, I think the thing that's most important to us in this generation is to just listen to what we're saying, and not even stop there. I think there's the most successful ones are actually bringing Gen Zers into the process, right? It's not just sitting down in an interview and saying, hey, what do you think of this? We can change it after this. It's actually creating with them, right? Co-creation is a huge discussion right now, and this idea of community is another buzzword that gets thrown around, but also something vital to the experience right now for Gen Z of like, it's not just to and for this generation, it's with. And I think the more that we can have that conversation, and the more people realize that, I think, like you talked about the challenges earlier, this is another fundamental challenge we see of just the control that marketers have in their process. There needs to be a degree that gets kind of let loose a little bit, right? You have to bring young people in, because you're never going to, truly, there's just the only people that can truly understand the trends and the way these things are evolving are young people. And so it makes things easier for you, right? The struggles and challenges can be solved, or at least, lowered by just bringing young people in to help with it.
I see so many schools that are starting to get this concept, Andrew. There's a ton who are still not getting it, but I'm seeing more and more schools saying, you know what, we're going to bring in a handful of students or have a student panel that sits in on our monthly marketing meetings, for example, or something like that, just so as they're hearing us talk, they might go, yeah, that's not going to work. You don't want to do that with this generation of students, and here's why. to your point, I love this concept of with. So if we're trying to get students to say, all right, or young people to say, we want you to be part of this process. If I don't know you and you don't know me and I want to reach out to you, Andrew, how do I get that conversation going? How do I get you to say, all right, I don't know who this person is, Jaime Tears, I'm going to open this email, or I'm going to respond to this text. Is it a certain medium? Is it a certain way you phrase it? I mean, give me any thoughts on that when you start a conversation with somebody you don't know.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think it's all of the above, right? It's number one, understanding the platform is important. Where can you reach these, this generation in a place that they're initially going to be even receptive to the note overall, right? I think if you're giving Gen Z a phone call, like, it's probably already off to a bad start. And so even email, email is, I know it's the foundation of higher ed and email marketing. I mean, it's just the foundation of everything. But again, like these for Gen Z, email specifically has a very, very unique role in the day-to-day life versus a TikTok and an Instagram and a Snapchat and a Twitter. And so understanding where you can enter that conversation, what the expectation, what is a Gen Z on Instagram expecting to see, and then when they do see an ad or when they do see a marketing promo, what are they feeling, right? That's important to start.
Alrighty, we're gonna play a game, guys, okay? So, first and foremost, get a pen, get a paper, pull out your notes app on your phone, whatever it might be, okay? Got it? Great. All right, what keywords does your website currently rank for? Take a couple seconds, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. I give you a few, not just a couple. What doesn't it rank for that you think it should rank for? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, what are a few keyword opportunities that you could be winning on if you just simply tweaked some of your existing website copy? Got it? Okay, how'd you do? Ooh, not so hot. Not sure what you're currently ranking for, or not sure what you could be ranking for. Well, that's okay, because our friends at DD Agency want to help you answer all of these questions. DD Agency is a higher ed specific marketing technology agency that has conducted countless SEO audits for colleges and universities across the country. In these audits, they detail where you currently rank, what you could be ranking for, exactly how copy should be tweaked on website pages, and so much more. If this sounds like something that you could benefit from, give the guys at DD Agency a ping and be sure to mention that Enrollify sent you to claim a 10% discount on any of their SEO offerings. So head on over to enrollify.org/DDA SEO. That's DDA as in DD Agency, SEO, or simply follow the link in the show notes below. That will guarantee you get a 10% discount off of your audit. All right, head on over to enrollify.org/DDA SEO, or simply Google DD Agency, find DD Agency's website, and be sure to mention that you heard about them through Enrollify when you request your audit. All right, folks, back to the show.
So I want to come back to feelings for sure, because I think you hit on something there that is uber important. But let's go back to this concept of, all right, Andrew, I have all this data, and we do massive surveys with tens of thousands of students. We partner with other companies and do that throughout the year too. And we've asked for 9+ years running things like, all right, what's the primary way you want to be communicated during your college search? It's overwhelmingly email. What's the first kind of communication you think a college should send? It's overwhelmingly email. Do you think then students are lying to us, or do you think it's just kind of like, I don't know, that's what I'm supposed to say, I feel like, because that's what the generation before me did? Like, thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's, I don't think they're not lying, but I do think it's a little more complicated than just looking at the data and saying, oh, okay, well, they said email, so let's just stick with email. I mean, I think part of it, yes, is this conditioned idea that, okay, like institutions, brands have always been communicating with me there, so that's kind of where I'm expecting them to communicate. And like I think there's a formal role that email kind of has. There's a feeling of email that still has formality compared to the other platforms, and like there's a balance that a brand needs to play, especially in higher education. There's things you need to protect around your status as an institution, right? And so I think email certainly plays a role there. I think if you're getting a DM on Instagram from a school, like it may not, people may be like, why would I, like, this is not legitimate, right? But then the next step is like, okay, well, what is it that they're actually communicating via email, right? That's the first step. And the second step is, well, how do you actually get them to open that and read it, and do something, even the third step.
So think back to your college search, because you're not that far removed from it. And I know you have friends who I'm sure you talked about this with, that you can remember conversations. I don't know if Vanderbilt was your dream school, right? Or if it was a school that, again, you always knew you wanted to go to. But what got your attention and got you to open things, and or your friends, and or if you all have done research specific to any of that, thoughts on any of that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess I remember colleges coming into my high school and hearing them talk and all that stuff, but I think the biggest differentiator and like what helped the most in the decision making process was not what I was receiving from them. It was actually the actions I took on my own to investigate what my curiosities were. It's the fact that I would go on YouTube and say day in the life of a student at Vanderbilt, right? And you look at, I mean, one of my friends actually, Elliot Choi, he was kind of one of the original creators of like the college day in the life videos, and he went to Vanderbilt, but like the influence that those videos have, because you're able to feel and live with these students through your screen, like that was so telling, right? And even just singularly of the type of student that goes there, for someone, because there were videos about that, like it told me that, hey, people like their school, they want to share what their experience is like because they want to show others that they care about that. And so yeah, I would get an email from Vanderbilt and I would probably, I don't know, open it and maybe read it, but then I would go on YouTube, then I would go on TikTok and search what's happening, and like that's where the influence happened.
And it's interesting you say that, because no question, right? We're a visual generation, especially young people. It's what they've grown up with technology. My daughter, if we would let her, would sit on her tablet and watch YouTube videos and, vlogs all day, every day, right? But at the end of the day, I think, and I'd love to get your take on this, what separates obviously that from an email or from anything that has text is it's visual, and you just get a whole different set of emotions and feelings when you watch something than when you read something, right? And so let's hit on that concept of feelings, because when I lead training workshops, Andrew, I talk a lot about how important feelings are. Young people tell us all the time, the feel of campus, literally feel is in air quotes on a survey, ranks as one of the top couple things that helps them select their college or university. And how the admission staff and other people treated me throughout the process also ranks super high. What have you found, or what has DCDX found, when it comes to just the importance of feelings and emotions when it comes to any kind of decision making for Gen Z?
Yeah, great question. So to link this back to part of the earlier conversation around the amount of information that's out there, one thing we study a lot is the effectiveness of advertising and what's like kind of where we are today and where we might be going. And I think when we look at the trajectory of trust, right, how are we getting this generation to trust and believe in things they're hearing and seeing? It started with this idea of institutions and kind of a centralized source, and there's a lot of studies that show there's a high distrust for like these governments or institutions or things that may be saying they're doing things but not actually doing them. And so we move from there to influencers and the way that influencers have shaped from kind of a 1 to 1 million scale, but a more decentralized version. And we're continuing to evolve, and now we're in kind of this community driven phase where there's a higher level of trust and truth coming from a community. I mean, things like Reddit, right? Especially in the college process, the College Confidential and these Reddit platforms, because you're getting this anonymized source of truth from others. But this is coming full circle to your question, is that experience for this generation kind of becomes this undeniable source of truth, right? Where because there's so much misinformation out there, on TikTok you can watch a video and not know if it's created by AI or a fake voice. The idea of experiencing something yourself gives you this undeniable truth. And I think when you talk about feelings and vibes and like these emotions, it's because you can see all these things and you can hear all these things, but when you actually feel them, it gives you this you have to trust it. And I think that's why we see this being so powerful, both in advertising and in as a word that comes up to describe how we're what is influencing our decisions.
So let's expand on that, because to me, you create feelings a couple of different ways. The language and tone of an email, a text message, whatever it is going to create some set of feelings, right? Mm-hmm. If you're being empathetic, if it feels like you're feeling, and writing in a personal way versus a very transactional way. colleges talk a lot about the importance of, well, we just need them to get to visit campus, right? Because they're going to be able to see it, of course. But you and I both know there's no way every student, not even close, could visit, even if they wanted to,
Right.
because of means and other things. So, what advice would you give to somebody listening who's like, all right, I know how to do it in person when it comes to creating feelings, but those experiences you talked about, Andrew, how do I create those then when I'm either creating video content for them to watch, an email, a text? Thoughts on those things?
A couple ways to approach this. One is the social content you can put out that shows and gets people to feel the emotions and the stories of the students that are there, right? Whether it's a day in the life video from a student or just highlights of current students, that's one direction. But the other is giving them opportunities before they get to campus to hear from them. Like, I mean, is there a way to talk to some current students, some freshmen or some seniors that have been there for 4 years and might be able to give some more advice on that? And so I think just making it a more human process, building the connection with people, whether it's virtual or in person, is really what gives some of that vibe and that feeling.
Well, and that to that point, Andrew, we see that work really well when we create, a company I work for, Tutor Collegiate Strategies. We work with a handful of colleges and universities where we write a lot of the messages they'll send to, for example, a lot of the Gen Zers we're talking about today. And one of the ways we try to create some of those feelings is, you might be sending an email on March 6th today when we're recording this to a bunch of admitted students if you're at a college who haven't made their final decision yet. Well, so many of them are struggling, because we see this in the data, with like, how do I know I'm making the right decision, right? I'm worried I'm going to make the wrong decision. Well, why not go talk to some of your current students and either A, get them to talk about that on video, or worst case B, get some direct quotes from them that you can then put in an email and frame the email as, listen, if this is something you're experiencing and thinking about, totally normal, happens with students every year. So you know what? I went and talked with a few of our students who dealt with this last year and our first year students now. Here's what they told me to tell you. Do you feel like that's an effective strategy if somebody's trying to get the attention of Gen Z and create those feelings?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is effective. It's not distilling, it's not making the truth muddy. It's just, if the students are saying positive things, then you're seeing those. And it's like, I think there's no one wants to be sold to, no one wants to be feeling like they're being pushed and pulled in a certain direction. If you just give transparency into the voices of the students, that's really what authenticity means, right? Like that, to talk about those buzzwords you mentioned earlier, it's the biggest buzzword that's out there on Gen Z, but authenticity is just not being afraid to let the feelings and vibes of on campus emerge on their own, right? It's like let that speak for itself, let the students speak for itself, and if you feel like, and if it's bad, well that's, then there's other problems to take care of on campus before you start to think about where students are coming from.
And I know dcdx has done work with brands like Chipotle. So what did that work, or any work you've done with other brands, Andrew, help you all understand about how Gen Z kind of looks at brands and what causes them to be loyal?
Yeah, I think when you think about the idea of loyalty, and Chipotle is definitely a good example, but it certainly shows in other places. Like it's feeling as a person, not even just as a young person, feeling as a person that the brand genuinely cares about you and your life, right? Versus they just want what's in your pocket. And if you as a brand or as an institution are able to make that distinction and make that a focal point of your process, the tables turn quickly, right? Where it's starting to feel like, hey, they don't just want me as a student on their campus. They want me to be happy, right? They know that I'm lonely right now. They know that I struggle with my mental health or whatever it is, and they're genuinely concerned about that and want to help me with that. Well, then I start to see you as maybe you are someone who can really help with this. Not someone that's just not feeding into that automatic cycle of ignoring emails and getting rid of that. It's like, oh, they actually want me to be happy. Wow, that's amazing, because we don't get that from other places.
What do you think then the biggest misconception is about Gen Z? Like, what do you see more than anything else where you're like, I don't know where this comes from, but people think X and it's just not true?
Yeah, I think to play off of the previous point, it's this idea that we're this generation's complaining a lot, or they're weak, or just like, I mean, especially related to the mental health conversation, right? It's like, just get over it, or why is this such a big problem? We had the same, we saw the same things when we were growing up, and I think that's a huge misconception, and it's a dangerous one, right? Because it shows that you don't understand young people. It shows that you're not listening to them, and it shows that you don't care about solving this problem and making it better.
Any strategies that you're seeing work well for companies, Andrew, that higher ed absolutely should be doing if they're not already doing it when it comes to being more authentic with Gen Z?
Yeah, I think we touched on this before. I think the biggest tip and most tangible takeaway is that if you have not done this already, find a group of students that are willing and want to talk about their experience with you and bring them into that process, right? It's not about making your marketing plan for this generation. It's about making it with them. And so bring them into that conversation. It's an easy way to do it. I mean, you're not hiring someone full time. You don't need to do that. You bring 20 students on campus together, and then a small group of 4 of them that you really trust and feel are representative of the voices that you're talking to, and have them involved in that. Put them in a text conversation with you and get their thoughts on stuff. Like those are easy ways to just bridge that gap and close the disconnect. Really understanding the role that you play in the life of this generation is the first step to finding that meaning, because there are now so many different brands. There's a new one that pops up every day. I don't know. I think there's an interesting example in the beverage space that just happened. Sierra Mist was put back for a new face of the Pepsi brand to replace it, Starry, and it was approached with this very let's make this totally for Generation Z. We're gonna make the colors be for Gen Z. And they brought Gen Zers in the process, but I think it was what they missed was just that it was just so aggressively clearly targeting this generation that it flopped, right? I mean, we'll see. It was recently launched, but the immediate reaction on TikTok and on socials was we'll just bring back Sierra Mist, right? And so when you talk about to relate this back to meaning and role, it's what role did Sierra Mist really play, or what role does Pepsi really play? And obviously you don't just want to be another brand that feels like it's targeting Gen Z. You don't just want to be another institution that's just trying to recruit students in the same way. There's a very specific type of student that goes to your school. There's a very specific type of consumer that shops for your brand, and playing into that, I think, will only build the love and loyalty that we see showcased so strongly from Chick-fil-A and Chipotle and all these kind of top Gen Z brands.
Why do you think people wait in line 10, 20 minutes a day at Chick-fil-A? Because they do it everywhere in the entire country, except obviously Sundays. But just thoughts on that. Starbucks, pick a brand. Why do people do that?
I think with those brands, there's just a presence they've had in our lives for so long, and they've built, the idea of convenience obviously being something that's so built into who this generation is. It's never been easier to get a coffee the exact way you want it, and have it ready every time you walk in the store. And I think there's just something powerful through that. Obviously, they've been working on the brand for I don't even know how long, but it's a long time coming. But I think we talk about something at dcdx called brand magnetism, right? This idea of how your brand's actually able to attract and pull in conversations from Gen Z rather than seek them out and push them, right? And we measure that in a quantitative way, but what we see when we analyze brands from this brand magnetism factor is looking at what factors are actually causing that conversation, right? What factors are causing young people to talk about your brand organically without needing that prompt from.
What are those factors?
It changes by industry, and so in QSR specifically, there's things like the drive-through experience. What kind of engagement comes from there's so many videos of Starbucks content where there's people in a car talking to the drive-through cashier person that's taking your order, and or ASMR content is crazy. How much your brand can actually leverage some of the content around people's fascination with just watching other people eat. It does vary by industry, but overall, right, it's just this different way of looking at culture and kind of analyzing what truly is causing young people to talk.
I feel like the more personal, the more relevant, less transactional you can be in any medium, and all these other words we talked about before, authenticity, empathy, no question, I would argue that gets more people to engage. I also say you just have to ask more intentional questions a lot.
Fair.
We've gone from asking, I use this example a lot when I do training workshops. We don't just ask our daughter, how was your day anymore? Because we'll get good, right? That's all we'll get. Now it's like, Olivia, walk us through everything you did in each of your classes today. But Andrew, right? And I know you're laughing. We get the answer we want.
Yeah.
All right. In math, I did this. And I think a lot of it is there has to be more direction than just saying, Andrew, do you have any questions? Well, of course Andrew has questions. The problem is a lot of times you don't know what you're supposed to ask. And wait, I don't want to say something that sounds dumb. And so any thoughts on just, it's also the language you use when you communicate, regardless of what medium it is, that has to be more relaxed, conversational, less robotic. Thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I think that's a great example. I also have been saying good to my parents for the last 10 years of responding to how was your day. So I should have given them that tip when they were asking that. But no, you're right. It's not just where you're asking, it's how. And I don't know, I was talking to someone about Gen Z in the workplace the other day, and they were asking like, hey, why are Gen Z so refusing this idea of like, if your boss asks you to present something on this, like the next day, going to do it? And it's just because just the methods of communication. Like maybe they can put it together in a slide deck for you in 2 hours and turn it around and make it better than anything they could do. But the fear of or even just the discomfort maybe of getting up and presenting it might make it more challenging. And obviously, yeah, should they as a business skill be able to go up and present something? Sure. But can we work first by just getting the presentation, in the format that they want, and then get them more comfortable to go up there and talk? And I think it's just a matter of approaching the situation from the ways that young people are comfortable doing so.
A couple other things I want to hit on before we finish up today. What are you and DCDX focused on for the rest of 2023? Anything you can share? Like, where's your focus right now?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to actually bring this back. One of the questions you asked earlier was the behaviors in 12 to 24 months that are emerging. And there is one that I think is particularly relevant that we're focusing in a lot on the longer term. A couple weeks ago, the CDC just released a youth risk behavior report that was a 10-year study from 2011 to 2021. Why it took 2 years to come out after that, I don't know. But they just released it in February of this year, and it shows some really scary numbers on mental health and on loneliness for this generation. And so a lot of our work, even with brands, is focusing on how can we put your brand in a spot where you're contributing in a positive way to the trends and trajectory of these behaviors. And so, one thing, we're in the dating space right now doing a lot of work on how we can help Gen Zers build healthy relationships, because in the dating world there's a lot of negative trends happening, and it feels like we're headed towards a really dark space on that side, and it echoes a lot of the things that we've seen around loneliness and around these feelings of sadness and hopelessness that exists with so many folks. And so we're building around these themes in a lot of the spaces that we're working with our clients in. And I think I think there's a responsibility that we have as a company at DCDX, but also a responsibility that brands should have to keep these things in mind, because these aren't trends, and they're not nice to have. Like, these need to change. Otherwise, 3 years from now, we're going to be having a very, very different conversation that we should have had a long time ago, which is how do we get, I won't even go into there, but we need to change things. Yeah.
No, it is such an important conversation, and businesses, colleges, for the most part, all need to invest more in mental health resources. And, I keep going back to one of the first words you used today, listening. There needs to be more listening. And there's a difference, between, for example, active listening and what I call, people call competitive listening. It's just something that those things go a long, long way to getting people not only to engage with you, but to pay attention and to communicate, I would argue, with you. This is a loaded question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, so take it any which way you want. Thoughts on ChatGPT?
Oh, man. My personal thoughts, or...
Personal thoughts, how it's going to impact just companies, businesses, anything along those lines that you think will be helpful for the audience, and anything personal you want to include.
Yeah, I think from a business point of view, and the news with some institutions trying to ban it, kids are smart. I don't underestimate the savviness of kids. And so if you ban ChatGPT from your school, we're going to find a VPN to work your way around it. So it's not the question of, and that's just one example of, whatever you do, we're going to find a way around it. And so I think understanding and trying to figure out, not, it's some learning I'm trying to do, is how we can build this into our everyday, or if not our everyday, like in the places that it's useful, and trying to leverage that. Because I think what we risk with ChatGPT is this reliance on, it's reliance on old information just being used in different ways and to repurpose something new, but it's all based on, this old existing sets of information. And so like there's a risk to creativity, and then also a need for a focus for people on creativity. And I think creative fields are going to especially need to understand how to use that, because it's going to be an important tool for figuring out how to create something that's genuinely novel and innovative.
Yeah, and speed and convenience, I feel like, Andrew, have never been more in demand, aka
Right.
we all want more speed, happen
Right.
faster, and we want it to be. And I'm with you. I hope what people are going to use is how do I harness ChatGPT to allow me to be more efficient, for example, with my time. Andrew, we end every episode with two things. The first one is a signature question. What's been the most influential resource for you in your young career so far?
TikTok? Is that a fair answer?
Sure.
Yeah.
Why though?
I think, as a Gen Z research company, the amount of time I spend just on the platform to understand, excuse me, how the language people are using, the things that they're feeling, like it is a tool into culture that I think is so fascinating. And I don't know, there was a big article the other day a couple months back on TikTok is the new Google, and I don't think that's necessarily totally true, but there's certainly some valid points into it. And it's just like, it's a resource. It's an education resource. It's a artist discovery research, finding new music there. I found a cooking video last night. I was making some pasta, and I was like, all right, let me search how to make this. And 2 minutes later, I made a pasta based on a TikTok video. And so, no, I don't know. I just think both personally and professionally, it's been like there's positives and negatives, but it's been a very resourceful place.
It's Gen Z's equivalent of how to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Fun rapid fire is the last thing we do. I'm just going to give you 4 or 5 things, and I just want quick answers that pop into your head, okay?
Beautiful.
Your favorite restaurant is?
We said it too much today, so I guess I have to say Chipotle.
I hope that's truthful.
I did.
What's your go-to order at Starbucks?
I'm just a black coffee drinker. Just a black.
You and me both.
Yeah.
I'm an Americano with a blonde espresso all the way. Spotify or Apple?
Spotify.
You have to pick one. I think I already know the answer, but Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok?
If I have to pick one,
Yep, you only get one.
YouTube, actually. Yeah, to detoxify my life a little bit.
Okay. And will Vanderbilt, your alma mater, make the NCAA men's basketball tournament this year? Yes or no?
I am praying every single morning and afternoon that they do. So I got all my bets on yes.
Well, I think they will probably have to do a couple things in the SEC tournament, but Coach Stackhouse, I think, has them headed in the right direction.
I hope so.
Andrew, I appreciate you being on and sharing your knowledge with us. For people who want to connect with you, what are you comfortable with that you're willing to share in terms of the best way to do that?
Yeah, I honestly, anyone, whether you're a student or a professor or anything, you're welcome to get in touch. I always love a conversation, a phone call and stuff like that. So, no, shoot me an email, andrew@dcdx.co, and I'm always happy to chat.
Yeah, and Andrew's LinkedIn bio, if you want to hit him up there, will be as well in the show notes. So, Andrew, I appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, no, Jeremy, thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversation.
Hey, all, Zach here from Enrollify. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mission Admissions with Jeremy Tiers. If you like this episode, do us a huge favor and hit that follow and subscribe button below. Furthermore, if you've got just 2 minutes to spare, we would greatly appreciate you leaving a rating and a review of this show on Apple Podcasts. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. But Enrollify is far more than just a podcast network. Enrollify is where higher ed comes to learn new marketing skills, discover new products and services, and find their next job. We're a growing learning community of 4,000 members, and we'd love to welcome you into the fold. You can access our free blog articles, newsletters, e-courses, and more or purchase our master course on how to market a university with Terry Flannery at Enrollify.org. We look forward to meeting you soon and welcoming you into the community. Again, you can subscribe for free at Enrollify.org.